Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. I know we have some people who have not participated in this implementation up to this point. So I'm going to take just about 5 minutes to introduce you all to the process. And then we're just going to dive into what peer review is all about and how we're going to accomplish that. So just a reminder for anybody who is unfamiliar with priority-based budgeting, we break this out into 3 basic questions. The first one being, what do we do? The second one being, what does it cost? And the third, why are we in business? So this first, what do we do, is establishing an inventory of programs that help describe the services provided by the county. So this is just an example of services from our database, but the reason that we do this is that programs really help to tell your story. By creating a program, it helps to create transparency. People understand better a program than a line item. It gives you a different way to compare services. It allows you to plan for the future, and it gives you some sort of context for performance and metrics. So that's the what do we do question. The second question, what does it cost? This is taking the line items from your budget and allocating them to the programs identified. So we do this in 2 steps. We allocate our time in a percentage to the programs. So personnel is allocated out of 100%, so 5-10% to a program. But then we allocate the non-personnel costs by dollar amount. So when you get into the tools, or if you get into the tools, you'll see that we have it split out by personnel and non-personnel, and then that's going to create an overall program cost. And then finally, we have the why are we in business. This is what actually ties the line items to the priorities of your county. So we will go through the scoring process to say how those programs are influence the success of each one of your result areas. Again, for those who are unfamiliar or just need a refresh on the process that we have been going through, we start with the program identification. Kind of in tandem with that, we start the results definitions process. That has continued until we started the department scoring. So we go with identifying our program inventory. Then we assign the value to those programs during cost allocation. We go through a self-assessment where the departments actually self-scored their own programs against the result areas. We are now over into the peer review, which is where we create cross-functional teams to go through and review and validate those scores that were entered during the department scoring phase. After peer review, we'll move into final scores, and that's where the leadership team will go back in, make sure there's nothing sticking out that looks incorrect or feels wrong. And then once we do that, we'll save the model and we'll have our final alignment, which just shows the level of alignment for each program to the priorities defined by Finney County. So we have gone through and we are connecting the strategic plan to the line items through the results. There's another area that department scoring went through, which is called our basic program attributes. This will not be a part of peer review, but just so you know, in addition to the results, the departments scored against 5 basic program attributes that are provided by ResourceX. These are mandate, reliance, cost recovery, demand, and population served. The reason we include these is not all results will take into account the fact that a program is mandated. Not all results will take into account that a program has full cost recovery. So we go through and do that, and then your commissioners, I believe, are going to go through and actually peer review the basic program attributes. So you all are going to be focused on the results side of peer review, but I did want you to know that we've also gone through this additional decision-making scoring process with the basic program attributes. So now we're going to begin the peer review process today. Does anybody have any questions of just kind of the thought behind priority-based budgeting before we get into the hows and whys of peer review? Okay, well, we're going to just jump right into peer review then. So why do we do peer review? Peer review, in my opinion, is one of the most important pieces of this priority-based budgeting implementation. The reason I feel that way is that it takes, I think it takes the emotion out of scoring, and it takes the emotion of how something might fall in the quartiles, and it really truly adds a level of consistency and fairness. So what we do is we ask people to come together in a team, review all of the programs for your entire program inventory against one result area. What this does is it helps people from outside of one specific department understand the programs that are throughout the county. It also gives you an understanding of why a department feels strongly about one program and how it scored versus another program. It definitely adds transparency to the process because everybody is going to see what departments scored their programs. You're going to get to go through and try to gain an understanding of why they scored it that way, and then you're going to make the final decision as to whether or not you agree with that. This is going to add to the consistency and fairness because we're going to have the opportunity at this stage to look through the entire program inventory for your result area and see what list of programs fell with a score of 4, what had a score of 3, what had a score of 2, and look at it more holistically and say, we have 40 programs that scored a 4. Do all 40 of these programs, does that make sense that they're all a 4 when compared to each other? There may be one that sticks out that says, you know what, I don't think that library shelving has the same level of influence on safe community as patrol. I disagree that library shelving was scored a 4. That's a very extreme example, but just so you know, that's kind of how we get to look at this. And this is the first opportunity for your organization to get to look at the full breadth of every program that scored a certain way against a certain result area and determine whether or not that's consistent and fair. This is also a great time for the peer review team to provide additional input. There's going to be a space for peer reviews to enter comments. That's going to be really helpful for Randy and Beth as we move into the final score to understand your interpretation of a program and how it scored against a specific result. Okay, so we have the department self-assessment completed by Monday. So this is, again, where the departments are going to go in. They're reviewing all of their programs for their department against every result area and the basic program attributes. They are going to assign a score of 0 through 4, or no influence versus essential to success, and they're going to assign a value to that program. Today, we are talking about the subject matter expert. So we're switching from subject matter expert for programs to subject matter experts for a result area. Each one of you will be assigned a result area, and you will be the ones who get to go through and really fully understand that result and evaluate every program against that result area. You will have the same scoring criteria of no influence to essential to success, and you will go through and just take a look at how the department scored, determine whether or not you agree, and then make your recommendation for the final score. Like I said, each team will be assigned a specific result area. Every single program in the inventory will be reviewed during the peer review process. We are going to assign a team to each result, and we are going to have a facilitator for each one of those teams. Just as you may notice in those bottom greens, we have combined some of the governance results. For those who are unfamiliar with the term governance versus community, we have broken out the results and the program inventory into 2 groups. The community programs and community results have to do with those services that are external facing. The governance results and governance programs have to do with those services that are internal facing. So we have combined several of the governance results into 2 peer review teams because just the volume of programs that fall into governance is a smaller amount. So by combining, we'll have about the same workload for everybody throughout the peer review process. I believe Beth has shared with you the teams. If she has not, surprise, here they are. You'll see we have our 4 community result areas: community well-being, safety, infrastructure, and economy. And then we have our 2 peer review teams for governance. The first including customer service, collaborations, and stewardship, and the other for resourcefulness and integrity. Each one of those governance results or peer review teams, each one of those result areas will have its own template. So you're not going to have to worry about trying to balance customer service, collaboration, and stewardship all at the same time. You'll go through one template for customer service, then you'll go through a template for collaborations, and then you'll go through a template for stewardship. We mentioned the facilitator. The job of the facilitator is not going to be anything extreme or above and beyond what the others are doing. It just simply focuses the effort for following up on one person. That way, if on the day that you guys are going through a peer review, we'll have one person trying to get in touch with a department director to get more information if it's necessary, rather than having the entire team trying to get in touch with a department director. The facilitator is also going to be the one who's responsible for submitting the final score sheet or template. So this is not going to be anything that's going to be a massive increase in effort, but just the person who kind of keeps things organized and moving forward. We're going to get into a lot more detail about the meetings that are going to happen on November 30th, but just some basic best practices. Start with the programs with the highest scores and identify the ones you agree on first. Go ahead and do that. Once we see the scorecard, you'll see how this is going to be helpful, because you can filter those out of the way and focus on the ones where you might need more information or the team can't come to a consensus easily on that first round. And then the facilitator will go through when you have any disagreement or lack of consensus. The facilitator can follow up with the department and get more information that might help come to consensus. And then also at the end, just finishing out the score sheet and turning that back into Beth. So here is the plan for November 30th. It's going to look a little bit overwhelming, but we've built in a lot of break time. We're going to meet at 8 o'clock for a welcome, just reminding best practices and things like that. Then you all will go into your first session from 8:30 to 10. You'll see we have some recommendations for what you should do during that first session. You should come familiar with your results and definitions. You should come having reviewed the program inventory. Just a reminder, department scoring is due on Monday. You all will receive your peer review templates before Thanksgiving. I don't expect you guys to spend Thanksgiving reviewing them, but just so you know, you'll have them prior to the peer review day on November 30th. So go ahead and look through those programs. Note the ones that you have questions about, so that when you come into that first meeting at 8:30, you can go through with your team and identify immediately the ones that you agree with. You will also have made notes about the ones that you disagree with, so that you can start those conversations during that first meeting. We'll break from meeting 1 at 10, and this is going to be when we are going to ask department directors to be available for you to follow up with them with any questions that you have. When you come back at 10:30 for session 2, hopefully you will have been able to gather that information so that you can get further with those where perhaps you had some questions or some disagreement, and try to get further in that process. Again, if you have not been able to get in touch with them, you can continue to try to contact them via email or phone to get the information you need. There may also be somebody else within that department who could help you answer that question. We have a lunch break, and then coming back for the final session. So during this session, we need to come to a consensus on every program, and the column for peer review scores needs to be filled with a numeric value 0 to 4. That final scorecard can be saved and then returned to Beth. And then I believe you guys are going to meet to have kind of a closing session. And I think there's going to be a photo. Just to give you, commonly asked questions as we get into peer review. Do not be afraid of changing a score. The entire purpose of peer review is to get the true and honest evaluation of each program. Just so you know, every single program is going to be reviewed based on all 4 community results or all 5 governance results, and with the additional review against the 5 basic program attributes. So your recommendation to change a score, whether you're raising the score or lowering the score, is not going to be the deciding factor for a program's Q1 assignment or Q4 assignment. So don't be afraid of changing a score. If your team comes to consensus on a score, then it's likely that's the one that is correct, that you have 3 people reviewing a program against a result area. And if you all come to consensus, that seems like a pretty fair evaluation. So again, remember to familiarize yourself with your result before coming in and review the program inventories before you come in. Make sure that you understand what the programs are and what they do. Prior to the peer review day, if you're noticing a lot of programs that you're being asked to peer review don't have program descriptions or scoring comments, and you feel like that's going to be helpful to you, feel free to go ahead and let Beth know that you need to have some additional program descriptions and or department scoring comments added in, because it's going to be really important to this process that you understand the programs and what they do. And then what you're going to do once you have all this information in front of you is you're going to determine if the score that was assigned during department scoring makes sense. You're going to determine this based on the result and the definitions that support that result, and then determining whether or not the program's influence on achieving that result matches up with the score that has been assigned. We're going to go into some more tips for how to approach this in just a couple slides. For the facilitator and the team in general, you do not need to follow up with the department every time you're going to recommend a change in score. Like I said, there are going to be 3 of you on the team. You're looking for the most consistent and fair evaluation of a program. You do not need to go to get further department information unless you really and truly don't understand what a program is or does. If you feel like you cannot understand the score that was assigned, and maybe there's something questionable in the program description or in the department scoring comments, and you just really feel like you need more information, that's when you go back to the departments and ask for clarification. You're going to decide as a team whether you agree with the score or whether you disagree and are going to recommend a change. Again, your change may be to raise the score, your change may be to decrease the score, but whatever that is, you're going to decide on it as a team. A few things that come up that we're going to avoid during this peer review day: you're not assessing the programs on any other result area other than the one that you are assigned to. These results have been determined and validated by the leadership team, so we're not going to need to discuss whether or not they're the right results. Don't worry about the overall relevance of the program across all the result areas. You know, I think sometimes people go in and they're afraid to change a score because, oh, you know what, I bet it's also going to be low over here, and I hope it's not going to be low here because if I do this, it's going to affect this. All you need to do is focus on your result area and determining the fair, true, and honest score for that particular program in that particular result area. And it says, have fun. This is a great chance to learn more about the services offered by the whole city. Haha, I should say county. But just, you know, this really is a great way for you to gain understanding of what your colleagues are doing across the organization. Okay, getting into the actual nuts and bolts of it all. So best practices for peer review. Here is what the scorecard is going to look like. You'll see we have the result type. So if you're a community result area, your result type is going to say community. If you're on a governance result, it's going to say governance. We'll have the department, the name, the description, and the comments that came from department scoring. You'll see we have the score department and score peer columns. The template, when it is downloaded and emailed to you, is going to default from highest to lowest. I recommend that you leave it that way so that you can go through and determine from high to low those that you agree with. So we have the high to low there, and then go through and enter here whether or not you agree with that score. So for example, if you agree that the library program acquisitions is in fact a 4, then you'll just type a 4 in score peer so that it matches score department. Anything that matches up, you can then, at the end of that first run through, you can filter out those scores so that you're then just looking at those that you either need more information on or you just need some further discussion on. Again, every single cell in the score peer column needs to have a value 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4 entered into it. An NA, a question mark, anything like that will not upload correctly. So please do come to a consensus and enter a numeric value there. Okay, so I said we would talk a little bit more about how to go through this process. So if anybody went through the scoring process, these are the tips that we used during department scoring, and they also apply to peer review. So the first tip is to go through and read each definition out loud and decide whether or not the program meets the definition. So does the program influence most of the definitions? If yes, then that higher score that's been assigned by the department is probably valid, and you can then start to determine whether or not it's a 3 or a 4. If it does not influence most of the definitions, then we're probably looking at a 0, a 1, or a 2, and you all can validate whether or not the department's got that correct. The other question to ask is, if the program was not available anymore, would it significantly impact the ability to achieve the result? If there's a significant impact, then probably a higher score is appropriate. If it doesn't, then probably a lower score is appropriate. As an example, this is from another organization. These are actually their governance results. They titled their governance results Innovation and Excellence in Service. The program that we are going to review as an example is Business Continuity and Disaster Recovery, with the description being Planning and Testing of Business Continuity Plans. During department scoring, these were some of the scores. Business Continuity and Disaster Recovery received a 1 in compliance, and there's the description that was provided by the department, minor compliance requirements to meet state and audit requirements. It scored a 2 in customer service with the comments there, and a 3 in trust and transparency. So there are 4 other areas, and we're going to look at high-performing org. Based on business continuity and disaster recovery and the program description, high-performing org is the result area we're talking about. And how would you score this particular program against this particular result? Just to give you some context, these are other programs from that same organization that also scored the same score in this particular area. So if we're looking at business continuity and disaster recovery, do you agree that that should have the same score as city council meals under the result area of high performing org? Does it make sense that business continuity and disaster recovery would have the same level of influence over high performing org as city council meals, as sublet repairs, as payroll processing and reporting? If you agree with that, then you'll see that the department score of 0, you would validate that. If you disagree and you think business continuity and disaster recovery doesn't fit with these other programs, that it has a higher influence on the success of a high-performing org, that's when you would make a note saying, okay, I think we need to review this further. I think that business continuity and disaster recovery actually has a higher level of influence on achieving the high-performing org result area. Okay, so here we are. We have defined the priorities for the county. We have gone through and assigned scores. We're getting ready to start peer review, and then we'll have the final score evaluation and validation. So all of the programs within your program inventory are going to be assigned to a quartile. We have lower quartiles, which are less aligned with priorities, and higher quartiles that are more aligned with priorities. You'll see on the bell curve here, what we do is we go through and we look at the final scores. We normalize the scores out of 100, find the average, and that's going to be the dividing lines between quartile 2 and quartile 3. From that dividing line, we'll do a standard deviation to determine the division between quartiles 1 and 2 and quartiles 3 and 4. The purpose of this prioritization is not to determine what programs should no longer be offered. It is simply to determine what programs are in such high alignment with the priorities of your county that if you were to receive new funds, or if you could reallocate funds away from something that's less aligned, these are the programs that as a county you'd want to focus on. So we're not asking for you to determine what programs deserve to be offered and not offered. This is simply taking a look at what falls in higher alignment with the priorities that have been defined by your leadership. So we have gone through connection to strategic plan and decision making. We've gone through and done peer review, or introduced peer review. Following peer review, we will have the final scores. That will go through a review process with the leadership, and then we'll have those finalized so that you all can access reports and information through the online tools. Okay. I believe that is all that I have to share with you today. The scorecards, again, will be distributed middle of next week so that you all can take a look at those and start to familiarize yourselves with your result area. In fact, I'll pull that slide back up just in case anybody was not prepared or didn't know what their area was. Beth should have a document that has all of the results with their supporting definitions so that you all can have that with you as you go through the peer review process. And then you'll have those templates so that you can review the programs to make sure they have descriptions and comments that will be supportive of your time and effort on the 30th. Okay, are there questions? Should any questions come up, Beth and I speak frequently, so please let her know if something comes up, if you have concerns about anything, if you feel like you don't understand your result or the definitions that support it, just let Beth know and she and I will work through it and get back to you with an answer. As far as the 30th goes, I will be available for questions throughout that process. Again, just let Beth know that you have questions and she can get in touch with me then. Other than that, Beth, let me know if you need anything.
Perfect. Thank you, Liz.
Thank you, guys. I hope, I know I won't speak with you all before the 30th, so have a great weekend. Happy Thanksgiving, and we'll talk on the 30th.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.